cattle rancher, kept a detailed journal of his encounters with a hairy man his Native American neighbors fed regularly. But it's the final entry about where they came from that rewrites everything. I didn't find the missing gold in the Colorado Rockies. I found the truth about the hidden world. A truth that wasn't written by a scientist, but a rancher in 1897. This leather-bound journal, which I pulled from beneath the floorboards of a derelict cabin, is more valuable than any treasure. Its cover is stained by blood and pine resin, carrying the weight of more than a century of silence, and a secret I was trained to decode. My name is Dave Mitchell, but everyone in town just calls me Mountain Dave. This is my story about how a wannabe lawyer became a mountain loner because of what he found that day. The man who wrote in it was Henry Blackwood, a prospector whose meticulous entries suddenly descended into the profoundly strange. As a former crypto-linguist, I am trained to look for patterns in chaos, for code in noise, and sandwiched between the legible script were crude, terrifying sketches, massive shadow figures with impossible musculature, alongside geometric symbols that defied any known astronomical chart. He wasn't recording sightings. He was documenting a profound trauma, a first contact event. I used my handkerchief to carefully wipe away the grime, my cold knot tightening in my stomach as I reached the final entry. The date was smudged, but the words were unnervingly clear, written by a man who had either lost his sanity or found the truth. It was an undeniable declaration that changed everything I believed about the hidden world. They are here, sent by the moons. The handwriting was precise, but the content was lunacy, until I cross-referenced the names and dates with obscure historical records, proving the rancher was real, and the lunacy was a detailed first-hand account of first contact. My background is in decoding, and faced with Blackwood's elaborate confession, I treated the text as an encrypted message. The rancher, Henry Blackwood, existed in 1897 Sisters, Oregon, and the dates he provided matched local weather reports and land registry records. This man was grounded in reality, which made the supernatural claims terrifyingly credible. I focused on the repetitive imagery. The creatures themselves were described with vague fear, but Blackwood spent pages documenting the celestial events that accompanied their appearances. He repeatedly used the phrase "flaming moons," describing them as silent, reddish-orange orbs that appeared on set dates on the horizon. This wasn't a demonic visitation or folklore. It was a highly organized society linked to specific, repeatable phenomena. Blackwood wasn't documenting a monster. He was documenting a coordinated arrival. The linguistic breakthrough came when I realized Blackwood used topographical descriptions of his ranch as mnemonics. The details weren't geographical. They were coded. Hidden within one entry, I found a cryptic sketch of his ranch, but overlaid onto the familiar landscape was something unnatural. It looked like a sophisticated protective boundary line, constructed of timber and stone, built by the creatures themselves. The rancher, I realized, hadn't just seen them. He had watched them establish a perimeter. This was an account of colonization, not coincidence. The discovery shifted the journal from historical oddity to actionable intelligence. The next phase, I knew, was finding out exactly where that perimeter had been established. The only way to locate the hidden people was to follow the light of their unnatural guides, the flaming moons. The journal didn't contain an address, but a series of astronomical observations, dates, and triangulation points relating to the strange lights. This wasn't a narrative. It was a complex map, disguised as a confession. Blackwood had painstakingly recorded the precise declination an azimuth of the flaming moons from his ranch on multiple nights. Information that, when reverse engineered, provided a clear vector toward a single, remote location. This wasn't guesswork. It was a piece of geopolitical intelligence hidden in an 1890s homestead journal. My job as a former cryptolinguist was to find an origin, a source point for a signal. Blackwood's journal gave me the ultimate signal, the path of the hidden people's arrival. I fed the rancher's angular calculations into topographical mapping software, cross-referencing them with the faint landmarks he'd sketched. The data converged, pointing to a remote, high-altitude location deep within the Sentinel Peaks region of the Rockies. It was a place where few maps possessed detail, an area known only for its unforgiving granite and ancient glacial gorges. The revelation was immediate and startling. Blackwood hadn't simply documented where the creatures came from, but the precise coordinates of their recurring rendezvous point. I secured the journal and began planning my insertion, replacing my carpentry gear with specialized surveillance equipment. The scale was immense, the danger unknown, yet the logic was inescapable. The only way to prove the truth was to stand where the rancher stood and wait for the lights to return. But when I checked the global positioning system indicator one last time, comparing the calculated map point to the original location of the cabin itself, the data did not align. The final coordinate pointed exactly to where the rancher's cabin should be, but the screen showed nothing but a deep, hidden gorge. Henry Blackwood had located the center of the phenomenon, and then he simply vanished. The air temperature dropped 10 degrees the moment I crossed the ridge, and the silence that followed wasn't natural. It felt like a vacuum imposed on the landscape. This was the edge of the rancher's known world. I had successfully inserted myself into the remote Colorado Rockies, but the coordinates led to the precipitous edge of a deep, unseen chasm. The air was thin and sharp, carrying no sound of wind or wildlife. I began my descent into the gorge, committed to the rancher's hidden map. I found the final landmark, a bent, ancient juniper tree, confirming I was in the correct, impossible place. The atmosphere below was thick. The unnatural silence meant the creatures had learned to be quiet. At the mouth of a narrow passage, I saw it. A massive, deliberate rock cairn. Not human, not natural, at least 7 feet high, blocking the entrance. The structure wasn't haphazard. The heavy basalt slabs were fitted with unnatural precision, clearly moved by immense force. This wasn't merely a pile of stones. It was an imposing, silent gateway to the unknown. The rocks weren't just piled up. They were precisely fitted, creating a deliberate, intimidating stone gateway into the hidden valley. I spent several minutes examining the cairn, recognizing immediately this was constructed by immense, intelligent power, validating the rancher's terror. Pressed into the damp earth beside the lowest slab was a single, immense footprint. It was far larger than any known human track, indicating vast weight and bipedal structure. The imprint was crisp, and it was fresh. The creatures the rancher wrote about were still actively patrolling this perimeter. I slipped through the gateway, pushing into the shadows of the inner gorge. The air here was colder, the silence heavier, like a blanket thrown over a secret. 20 feet past the barrier, I found the rancher's final warning. It lay half buried in the soil, a bleached animal skull with a single massive clean puncture hole. The surgical precision of the break confirmed the message. Anyone who dared cross this threshold had been judged. The valley floor was an inverted bowl of ancient cedar and glacial meadows, bathed in an unnatural, filtered light. And I could already tell I wasn't the first human here, just the first in over a century. Pushing past the stone gateway, I entered the High Lonesome Valley, a bowl-shaped basin sheltered from the exterior world. The air was noticeably stiller, the silence broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible sound of water trickling beneath the moss. The sheer volume of ancient, petrified wood confirmed the location's stability and isolation. I quickly established a covert surveillance camp, nestled high in the rockfall, deploying my parabolic microphone array and thermal camera. My heart pounded with the realization that every rustle, every shadow, meant I was exposed. The journal had warned me that the hidden people possessed unnerving awareness. They didn't just patrol the edge, they sensed intrusion. My initial scan of the valley floor confirmed the ranch's most cryptic entries. About 300 yards from my position was a nearly perfect circular clearing, a natural amphitheater ringed by massive, centuries-old trees. It seemed to be the rendezvous point Blackwood had mapped, the precise place where the flaming moons made their appearance. There was no sign of habitation, but the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. The fear wasn't visual, it was psychological. The lack of movement was more terrifying than activity. Just as the sun dipped behind the peaks, painting the valley in deep blue shadow, the parabolic mic picked up a sound unlike anything before. It was not language, not animal noise, but a low, rhythmic thrumming, a steady vibrational heartbeat that seemed to emanate from deep underground. It was growing louder, and it was the sound of something waking up. The low, thrumming sound continued, a constant vibrational heartbeat beneath the earth, and I realized it was perfectly synchronized with the astronomical dates the rancher had scrawled in his journal. I pulled Henry Blackwood's journal from my pack, its pages brittle, beneath the beam of my headlamp, and frantically cross-referenced the entry from the fall of 1897. The sound intensity was directly proportional to the proximity of the next documented celestial event. The rhythmic pulse wasn't random, it was a timer. The rancher, through painstaking observation, had mapped not just the appearances of the flaming moons, but the geological preparation that preceded them. The rhythmic thrumming was an indicator of an imminent, recurring celestial event, perhaps a localized shift in tectonic energy or a form of signaling device deep in the rock. The creatures weren't merely expecting the lights, they were actively waiting for them, keyed into a timeline established centuries ago. The pressure of the deadline was immense. I had only hours to find the true center of the valley before the rendezvous point became active. I was hunched over the raw audio feed, adjusting the equalization to isolate the deep bass frequencies, trying to discern a pattern in the sonic current. The thrumming was now so loud it vibrated through the rock I was lying on, making the hair on my arms stand up. I felt like a tremor in a machine far larger and older than the Earth itself. Then, at exactly the moment the journal predicted the peak intensity, the thrumming abruptly stopped. The deep bass frequency vanished, instantly replaced by an unnerving absolute silence. My mind screamed at the sudden vacuum of sound. I knew something significant had changed, and the next sequence of the operation had begun. Following the direction of the final sound, I found the heart of the valley. A perfect circle of ancient, petrified cedar stumps, the central one massive and covered in the same strange numerical symbols from the 1897 journal. The sudden cessation of the underground thrumming had given me a clear direction, leading me deeper into the High Lonesome Valley bowl. There, in the natural circular clearing the rancher had mapped, stood the great circle of cedars, silent witnesses to over a century of hidden activity. The perimeter was imposing, but the central stump held the true focus of the mystery. It was easily 12 feet across, its surface worn smooth by time, yet intricately scored with geometric markings. These weren't carvings made by hand or claw. They were too precise, too mathematically perfect. They resembled the symbols Henry Blackwood had sketched, but here they were fully realized, forming a sophisticated sequence of what appeared to be topographical and numerical data. This was an organizational site, a technical marker, not a ritualistic altar. I moved closer, the air thick with the scent of pine and something metallic, like ozone. It was an odor I recognized from my Navy days, the sharp tang of high-energy discharge. The contrast between the ancient wood and the high-tech, geometric information was chilling. I began setting up a high-resolution camera to document the symbols, aware that I was standing in the exact center of the rendezvous point. The silence was unnerving, broken only by a soft ping from my thermal camera. I checked the feed, expecting to see a massive shadow, but the camera registered a small, low-lying, intense heat source nestled within the hollow of the central stump. It wasn't a creature, it was an object, radiating unnatural warmth in the freezing night. It was an object that defied its surroundings, a piece of dense, polished obsidian, geometrically perfect, resting on the central stump, still warm despite the freezing night air. The relic wasn't natural, it was a highly manufactured tool, clearly a key. I lifted the stone, and the strange magnetic atmosphere of the cedar circle instantly dissipated. This wasn't just a marker, it was a key, and I had just taken it from the lock. The sudden, intense realization struck me. The owners were returning for their key, and I was holding it. I immediately slipped the obsidian relic into a shielded pocket. My impulse to observe was overwhelmed by the danger of holding their most important object. I was now a thief. A guttural, mournful howl erupted from the far ridge, followed by the cracking sound of a distant tree snapping. The hidden people were no longer approaching. They were converging on the cedar circle. The silence that followed confirmed dozens of highly intelligent beings realized their key was missing. I flattened myself against the rock, knowing the next move was theirs. The valley was suddenly alive with sound, complex, modulated vocalizations, the coded language from the Navy files, but they were communicating with the sky. I watched as dozens of massive figures emerged, organized and converged upon the empty stump. Their vocalizations were deep, rhythmic, and directed upward, a sophisticated signal toward the expected arrival. The creatures ignored me, their collective focus fixed on the area where the flaming moons were expected to appear. Their distress over the missing relic was evident only in the chaotic element woven into their orderly communication. I realized Henry Blackwood had witnessed their core operational procedure, a scheduled exchange with an unknown power. Their entire civilization was built around this cyclical arrival. As the creatures turned their gaze to the bare stump, a collective understanding rippled through the clearing. They were focused not on me, but on the missing key. I stared down at the journal, finally translating the rancher's warning. It wasn't about the creatures themselves. It was about the consequence of my action. When the sky calls, they gather. When the stone is gone, they seek the thief. The air above the valley began to shimmer, not heat distortion, but a massive column of electric blue energy. And then, slowly descending into that column, appeared the source of the rancher's terror, the flaming moons. The silence of the gorge was shattered by a low, powerful hiss as the atmospheric pressure fractured. The light was overwhelming, painting the entire valley in an impossible, ethereal glow. The flaming moons were not planets. They were silent, reddish-orange objects, perfectly spherical and metallic, descending deliberately into the column of light. This was a scheduled aerial rendezvous, a stunning contradiction of ancient forest and structured extraterrestrial technology. The hidden people below responded instantly, their modulated signals becoming frantic. Dozens knelt, their massive frames angled toward the descending orbs as if receiving a command. I held my breath, recording the data, trying to categorize the event. Communication, resupply, or something far more esoteric? The descending orbs slowed, hovering just 50 feet above the ground. The creatures below began to stand, their movements synchronized, reaching upward. The exchange was about to begin. Then, as one, their heads snapped down. They stopped focusing on the sky and began pointing in unison, not at the flaming moons, but directly at my position near the ridge. I had maybe 90 seconds before the nearest creature reached my hide. And in that time, I had to figure out what the flaming moons were exchanging with the ground, or risk becoming part of the exchange myself. The chase was immediate and silent. The creatures moved with terrifying efficiency, their massive forms flowing across the uneven terrain of the ridgeline, their eyes locked on my position. This wasn't a search, it was a synchronized retrieval operation. As I scrambled backward, documenting the scene one last time, the reddish-orange orbs began their descent toward the great circle of cedars. They didn't land. Instead, they deposited small metallic cylinders into the center of the clearing, dropping them with millimeter precision. The hidden people below rushed forward, retrieving the objects instantly before they could be fully exposed. The exchange was swift, organized, and clearly technical. I saw the massive lead creature, the one nearest my position, stop and collect a cylinder. But then, it did something that froze my blood. It reached into a pouch on its hip and brought out a piece of polished black stone. It was an obsidian relic, geometrically perfect, a twin to the one currently secured in my pack. They were not collecting the relic, they were delivering it as part of this recurring exchange, restocking the system for the next cycle. My realization was devastating. I hadn't merely stolen a key, I had interrupted a vital periodic delivery. The nearest creature, now armed with the knowledge that the new relic was in its grasp, lifted its head. Its low, modulated signal cut through the air, focused entirely on me. I saw the massive hands tighten around the newly delivered obsidian. I was cornered, and the creature was making a deliberate, primal gesture I knew I had seen before, both a plea and a demand for the stolen key's return. I stopped running, realizing the obsidian relic in my pocket was the only thing that could save me, but holding it also confirmed their deepest suspicion, that I was exactly the kind of interloper the rancher had warned them about. The creature stood 15 feet away, its immense shadow swallowing the last of the ethereal light from the ascending, flaming moons. Its eyes, dark and ancient, showed none of the simple aggression of an animal, only cold, calculated intelligence. This was the moment of true contact, a terrifying confrontation with a sentinel of a hidden civilization. The creature didn't move. It simply held the duplicate obsidian relic in its massive hand, extending it slightly, then drawing it back, making a distinct, non-verbal gesture. It was a clear, silent demand for the one I possessed. I slowly raised my hands, palms open, keeping my gaze steady. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and primal awareness. I realized the creature didn't need to pursue me. It simply needed to wait. I thought of Henry Blackwood, reading his terrified scribbles. The rancher had not passed away, trying to escape the valley, but was instead consumed by the phenomenon he was so close to understanding. He was a piece of the puzzle, not a survivor. The creature's silent demand confirmed my role as the usurper, the one who broke the cycle. I reached slowly into my pack, my fingers brushing against the cold, smooth stone. I was about to return the relic, but the creature lifted its free hand and focused its gaze on the gorge exit. It then made a gesture I recognized from the journal's cryptic drawings, a universal symbol for a permanent disappearance, for being gone forever. I didn't return the obsidian. I used it to communicate a truth even they hadn't considered. The flaming moons phenomenon, which they relied on, was being observed by a far more dangerous entity, human high-altitude surveillance. I held my pack open, showing the creature my global positioning system unit and my frequency scanner. Then, using simple, panicked gestures, I pointed at the ascending, reddish orbs, and then at the sky, mimicking the flight path of a silent, high-altitude surveillance device. The intent was clear. You are not alone. Others are watching your arrival. The creature's reaction was not one of renewed aggression, but of profound, terrifying realization. Its posture shifted from demanding to cold, calculating fear. The modulated signals it was broadcasting changed, becoming sharp, clipped directives to the surrounding sentinels. My warning had validated their deepest historical fear, the very reason for their extreme isolation. The rancher, Henry Blackwood, had tried to do the same thing over a century ago, to communicate the encroaching technological threat before he was made to disappear. The creature slowly extended its hand, not reaching for the obsidian in my pack, but offering the newly delivered relic from the exchange. It was a trade, my silence and my knowledge for safe passage. I placed my stolen obsidian into the massive hand, closing the deal. The creature made a final, urgent gesture. It pointed to the empty gorge, then to the sky, and then pointed at me. I was the new watcher, the new sentinel on the outside. As I began my retreat, I glanced back. The creature stood sentinel, its gaze fixed on the ascent path of the flaming moons, but its massive head tilted, searching the empty blue for the unseen threat. The gorge entrance was still guarded, but now it was different. It wasn't just the hidden people keeping watch. There were new tracks, human boots, subtle, military-grade, showing that the arrival of the flaming moons had drawn unwanted attention. My hurried retreat through the High Lonesome Valley was guided by the creature's silent pact, but the closer I got to the exterior world, the more evidence I found of a third party. Along the narrow exit path, faint, crisp outlines were visible in the damp soil. Not my heavy hiking boots, but thin-soled, highly specialized tactical footwear. I realized the ultimate implication of Henry Blackwood's journal. He was not just documenting a hidden society, he was documenting a scheduled, technological vulnerability. My warnings to the lead creature were tragically late. The Flaming Moons event, with its massive energy signature and coordinated movements, had been tracked by others far more sophisticated than the rancher or me. This was now a three-way standoff: the hidden people, the mysterious aerial delivery system, and the encroaching covert human surveillance. I secured the journal, the obsidian relic's twin, now safely hidden inside, and pushed through the final curtain of brush toward my extraction point. My mission had shifted from discovery to a desperate race to disseminate the truth before it was classified. The hidden people were not a myth. They were an organized civilization under threat of observation and exploitation. I finally broke the tree line and looked up the ridge where my vehicle was hidden. The air was empty. The only sound was the thin rush of the wind. But then I saw it, a tiny, silent movement high above the peaks, a perfectly still, high-altitude drone. It was watching my extraction point with unnatural patience, a silver eye confirming the existence of the true watchers. They knew exactly where I was, and they had been there the entire time. The journal is secure, but the questions it raises are just beginning. The mountains hold secrets far older than humanity, and the creatures who guard them are watching every move we make. If you want to decode the next chapter of this hidden history with me, ensure you subscribe, like, and share this story with those who dare to look up at the flaming moons. The valley is silent again, but the exchange is scheduled to resume. And somewhere, just beyond the tree line, the watcher waits.